How is an RPG made? In the second part of this video, Scott Fitzgerald Gray and I are going to talk about the later stages of creating a product. You've hopefully seen the first video, and we are going to help you understand how any size product, from something like this, which Scott Fitzgerald Gray created, the Hidden Halls of Hazakor, or a project like Acquisitions Incorporated or Forge of Foes that are behind me, or any of those cool books that you see there, official D&D books, Daggerheart, right? Something major like that, Shadow of the Weird Wizard. How does one make a book like that? I think this is awesome, even if you are a fan, to understand how your books are made. Or if you are a creator, I hope this series of videos, these two videos, are helping you understand that process. Let's jump in and look at later stages like layout and preparation for print and many other topics.
Proofreading is a little different. Proofreading, if it's at all possible, get that done at the layout stage, right? So that you're actually looking at what's on the page. So you're not catching just the small mistakes that were missed in editing, the small mistakes that were introduced because some sections were rewritten, right? And didn't have as much of a review as you would have wanted to give them, whether just because you were pressed for time or, you know, everybody else read it and they didn't see it. Here's a fun thing. Forge of Foes, if you've got the print copy, I wish I knew what page number it is. Maybe I can look it up. No, it'll take me too long. There's a page on Forge of Foes where there's an extra line, a blank line between two paragraphs. There's an extra line before a header. Okay. It doesn't exist. If you get the PDF now, it won't be there. I don't think the book has been reprinted yet. But if you got an original hardcover, it will be there somewhere. You can, there's no prize or anything, but if you look through it,
you can find it for fun. All right.
Forge of Foes was edited by me. It was reviewed by me, Teos, and Mike Shea. It was proofread by 4 different people, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. It was proofread at layout stage, again, by myself, by Teos, by Mike. None of us noticed this thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I remember there was a table where one of the numbers went, you know, as you went down, it should go up, and it went either down, it went, you know, up, down, up. And I said, wait, how could, what? And I don't know how we looked at this table, and many people looked at this table.
Yeah.
And I just happened to see it. And I'm like, when I went back to my original tables and found what the number should have been, but somehow it just happened, right? And that's the thing. There'll always be something, right? There will
always be some small thing. What you want to avoid is a larger number of big things, right? And that's what this process, everything about this process, that's what it's dedicated to, right? But proofreading absolutely at the layout stage, because it means you're not only looking for the small mistakes that have been missed and small mistakes that have been introduced, you're also looking for bad breaks. You're looking for paragraphs that don't line up properly. You're looking for, oh, there's this one spot here where this one line got indented somehow, right? Because that can happen at the layout. You hit the wrong key somewhere, right? And there it goes. You can find where, and this happens at layout a frighteningly huge number of times, a paragraph got deleted by accident, right? Working in InDesign, which is what most major publishers use for books, and it's what many even sort of indie folks use, is wonderful, because you can do something in InDesign and it will change something on a page you're not looking at. Right? It's one of InDesign's most awesome features. So you got to be careful. So yeah, like a proofread of the print, like of the PDF that you're planning on sending to the printer. Right. That's the best time for the proofreading stage. Right. And as many eyes as you can get on it at that stage is ideal.
All right. So when we have our edited sensitivity read, we've got that ready to go. We're going to put it into layout. So we either have those skills, or we need someone with those skills who is a layout person who will now put it into a format. And this involves things like embellishments in the corners and page treatments and what the headers are like, what the tables are like, right? I'll hold up, Daggerheart, which is a very, very beautiful book. It's got all these tables and it has, some very complex pages which have, multiple stat blocks, monsters. They do a neat thing throughout this book where they'll sort of, the art was clearly a whole page, or let's say an entire piece. But as I showed before, that they'll cut out the art, right, to have parts of it because it was done with layers, and so they can layer it, so they just make it really jump out of the page. Help me through what it means to hire someone to do this kind of work.
This is a good time to talk about when you're working at the indie level, right? And like whether you're working on your own or whether you're working with other people, you got a small group of like a little collective going, right? Like a group of friends, a group of players who want to put stuff out together. It's absolutely conceivable and often necessary to double up on the roles that go into putting a book together. Okay. As an example, okay, many editors also do layout. Okay. You can get dedicated layout people who like editing is not their thing, right? And that's great, right? They will often be stronger on the graphic design side, so they can make your book really pop in terms of how it looks, right? They can come up with cool ideas. But you might also be in a position where the editor can also say, you know what, I've got basic page layout skills. If we get a template, if we know what the book looks like, right, I can be the one who sort of like flows the copy, organizes stuff, sets the tables up, that sort of thing, right? Yeah. It's possible that you as a designer may have some layout skills, right? You may design the book yourself, write the book yourself, get it through editing, and then have it go back to you when you want to do the layout, right? Two roles you should absolutely never combine is writer and editor, because even if you are both those things, you cannot edit your own work as effectively as another editor can, right?
You'll do is create better writing, but someone still needs to take a look at it.
Someone still needs to do that final review to catch the stuff that you cannot see yourself. That's what it comes down to. Once you've decided on, okay, it's a layout stage, right? You can go out, you can find a layout person. There are many layout people out there. If you want to do it yourself, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I'm a big fan of learning as one goes, right? InDesign is the most expensive option because it requires a hefty subscription from Adobe, who is a company that generally sucks for the most part. InDesign is a program that literally no one I know who uses InDesign loves it.
Right.
Right. We all just kind of put up with it. Right. And that's not a great relationship to have with your software, in my experience. There are other options as well. There are, I'm really bad at remembering names. Hopefully.
Like Affinity.
Affinity, thank you. That's the one. Yeah, like Affinity Publisher is another app that lots of people like, lots of people swear by. It is certainly easier to get into than InDesign is. It is possible to do page layout in Microsoft Word. If you value your sanity, I would not recommend this, but I know it is possible. There are some great products out there that you can pick up on drive-through that I know have been laid out in Microsoft Word by people who really know what they're doing with Microsoft Word, and they look fabulous. I worked on a project with one such person some time ago, right? And I said, like, I was doing the editing, right? And I said, I said at some point, when this goes into InDesign, here's a couple of tweaks you'll want to make. And they said, no, I'm just using Word. And I was like, you're a god, right? I have no idea how you make your stuff look so good.
Look that good.
Just doing it in Microsoft Word. It's possible. Right?
Yeah.
All of these things have a learning curve if it's something you want to do yourself. If it's not something you want to learn how to do yourself, it is generally much better, much more expedient, and much cheaper, if in the sense that time is money in the long term, to just get somebody else to do it for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's a fun thing. The point when the layout starts is when your edit is done. The point at which you should get your layout started is before the edit is done.
All right. Yeah.
Because the layout of your book, we talked about this briefly earlier, the layout of your book determines how big your book is going to be based on the word count. Okay. Because if you have a book and you think, oh, this book should be, like 128 pages, and then you get somebody doing the layout, and the layout that they do turns out that the book is going to be 156 pages, that could be a problem for you. Okay. It is ideal, especially if you're doing a book that is going to have a lot of graphics involved with it, right? It's going to be a really good looking book. You want it to not just be like a sort of a boilerplate, here's some headers, here's a quarter page illustration up in the corner with a full frame and no kind of, cool background stuff going on, right? You want to have somebody look at doing the layout initially so that you can get a sense of, okay, this is the layout I like. I love how it looks. I like the size of the font. I love the choice of the font. And now I'm going to figure out how many words go on a page with that choice having been made. Because that then will tell you how big your book is going to be based on the word count that you're working on. If you don't do that, okay, then you're in a position where the layout happens. You have to then say, okay, the layout has to be a certain way in order to make the book the size that we want it to be. Okay. Usually that's not a problem. But if you're writing a book where you were planning on cramming a lot of text in on the page because you want a lot of text, but you want the book to be pretty small, you might be in a position where you're like, okay, this book is now not looking as good as I wanted it to because the font is really, really tight. Okay. Now a good layout person will be able to help you with that. They'll say, if the font needs to be small, here's some good choices for fonts that are quite readable at small sizes, right? They'll be able to sort of like maybe massage some other things, like make the margins a bit bigger, make the sort of the size that the text takes up on the page, make it as big as is comfortable before it looks like it's crowding the margins, right? Yeah. But if you've got, especially if you're doing a book that you know is going to be sort of very heavy on the art, very heavy on the design, getting someone to do up the layout format before the book is finished going through editing is a really good idea.
Right. Yeah. And
either way,
which is helpful because if you're no longer writing and it's going through editing, now you can focus on these kinds of discussions. This would also involve things like knowing what your header structure is, which actually is not bad to have when you even start writing, right? To have this idea of I have 3 heading tiers and my table always looks like this, right? You want consistency in that writing that will lend itself
I guess one of the assumptions that I've been making right now is that 5e has a particular style, right? It's got 3 levels of heading, and then it's got the bold, italic, inline subheader, right? And most is probably safe. Most 5e books, third-party 5e RPG books, follow that style pretty closely, simply because it's a good thing to do because you want people who are reading other 5e books to be able to read your book as easily as possible. But certainly if you had a special type of 5e book that you were doing, or if you're not doing 5e stuff, if you're doing your own game, or you're doing a supplement for Daggerheart, or for Draw Steel, or for Shadow Dark, okay, you've got other choices to make in terms of, do I follow their design as much as I can, okay, or do I do something that's a little bit different because I have this idea for a whole line of stuff. I'm going to put out a whole bunch of adventures, and I want them to have their own look. Okay. And that's something that your designer, your graphic designer, your layout person will be able to talk to you about. Okay. And there's nothing wrong with doing stuff that's kind of simple, right? You can go out, you can go on to drive-through and you can buy templates, right? That someone can just take, open up in InDesign, and then you just start flowing your copy. They're all set up really nicely. They say, here's the edit, here's the styles you need. Right. Here's what your font styles in Word should be called, so they flow in cleanly. Here's what your sidebars look like. That's totally cool. There's nothing wrong with that.
Scott, can you explain when you say flowing your copy, why you're saying that?
Oh, sure. At some point, you will take your document. Oh, actually, sorry. Here's another thing that I should have said way earlier. Again, I've been making the assumption that you're writing in Microsoft Word, because writing in Microsoft Word is the standard across not just the RPG industry, but across publishing in general, for better or for worse. Speaking of software that no one loves, but everyone just kind of puts up with, right? It's possible to not want to use Microsoft Word. It's possible to get away with not using Microsoft Word. Google Docs is the common fallback for a lot of folks, okay? Google Docs is a pretty good document editing system. It's really, really good if you're sharing stuff. Like if you got 3 people working on a manuscript, that's all good. Google Docs is not an effective publishing, I don't know what the best word is. It's not a good publishing content management system because it does not do certain things that your published RPG book needs to start doing once it gets into layout. Okay. Microsoft Word has paragraph styles and it has character styles. Google Docs has only paragraph styles, and you can't customize those paragraph styles, right? You can customize how they look. You can't customize their names. You can't come up like, as an example, most RPG books have sidebars in them, right? Google Docs does not allow you to set up a sidebar style, right? So that's something you got to think carefully about. Even if you write in Google Docs, there's probably going to be an intermediate phase where someone either takes the Google Doc, puts it into Word, and sets up all the styles properly. And I've done that on a lot of projects as an editor. Okay. Or you flow it into InDesign and you do all that styling manually.
Right. And these are things like bold is normally done as a style on a project like this rather than choosing bold in Microsoft Word, because it won't import into InDesign correctly, right?
Exactly. Yeah. If your document, whether it's a Word document that you haven't set up the styles correctly, or a Google Docs document that doesn't have character styles, if you apply bold, okay, when that text is flowed into InDesign, all the bold disappears. So that's sort of the idea of, like if you, like, at some point, somebody is getting paid to do this conversion. In my experience, it is much easier to do it beforehand in Word. Like, even if you're not working in Word, if you're like a Google Docs person, you can talk to your editor. You can say, we're working in Google Docs. We want you to edit in Word because we understand that that's what you do. Because most editors, I'm going to say like 99% of editors will prefer to work in Word, simply because Word has much more robust tools for tracking changes, for updating things, you can say to them, we want you to do that conversion and, make that a part of your rate, right? Whether it's an hourly rate separate to the Word rate that you're paying a person for doing an edit, or whether you just say, like, we'll treat the word count as slightly higher to cover the extra time, right? And then from that point on, you will have a Word doc that you'll be working with, right? So like your editor will hand back a Word doc with all the revisions and changes, right? At some point, it's almost inevitable that you want to get into Word. Okay, just because it makes the easiest option for copy flow from the text into layout. Because what happens, talking about what it means to flow a document, is you have an InDesign layout which has no text in it, and you import the text from Word and you flow it. And it's called flowing because it basically just fills column after column after column, going all the way down to the bottom. Okay. And that then is the starting point for the final stage of your book, the layout version of your book.
And InDesign will have done things like this is header 1 in Word, so I apply my template's look to it for all header 1s and all header 2s. And so that's where if you have a bold character style, it will actually pick that up and apply it. But if it was bold in Word, then it disappears. So those styles being applied, they all flow now into that InDesign. So I'm in InDesign and it'll require some review and so on, but I get into that layout stage. And
it'll probably definitely require tweaking. Like if you want to set it up most effectively, what happens is you make sure that all of your character style and paragraph style names in Word are exactly the same as they are in InDesign, and you don't organize your InDesign styles within groups, because Word has trouble translating between groups. Usually what happens is you have to do a conversion as you import stuff, like you bring it in. There's one of two ways to do that in InDesign. One is you can go through a complicated process of telling InDesign how to translate Word styles into the styles that are in the InDesign document. The other thing you can do is just flow in the styles and then just convert them over one at a time. I prefer the second thing because it means I don't have to remember ahead of time exactly like which styles are in the document, because I will inevitably forget one or two, right? But yeah, it's important. It's important that everything is styled properly in InDesign. Again, if you wanted to go straight from Google Docs to InDesign, you will get to the same point, but you're paying somebody else to make those changes at the layout, and that's really difficult because it takes a lot of time.
Yeah,
and it's a lot more labor intensive and a lot more prone to missing things.
Now, my layout will have all of the words, the tables, the headings. All of this gets pulled apart. We haven't touched on art. What's happening with art, and when does that start? When does that intersect layout?
Art absolutely starts when the layout happens, because you're going to start dropping it in, which of course means that you should have spec'd and bought the art sometime before this. Right?
So that means we're going back to planning, right? We talked about initially you've got things like chapters and so on. You hopefully, and we also talked about how for the layout, you would set up your layout template. So that's one of those things where you want to look, and it helps to look at existing books that you like and say, okay, how often should there be art? If this chapter is X pages long, and stop me wherever I'm wrong, but if the pages are X pages long, then I'm going, okay, I'm going to have one piece of art here for this double spread. And so you know the number of pieces of art more or less, and you can start commissioning that art based on what the themes are of what's being written in those chapters and so on. Am I missing pieces?
Yeah, no, that's it. Now, the choice of when you want to get going on the art depends a lot on your schedule. Okay. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing a completely linear schedule. And this is something that you'd get into when you go back to the very beginning, thinking about the project, thinking about what it's going to look like, how many pages should it be, what's my process going to be. If you want to write the book first and then get the book edited and then look at getting art for the book. And then once the art is done, or even as the art is getting finished, get it into layout. There's nothing wrong with that. It works very effectively. It puts you in the best position creatively in some way, because it means that you're not speccing art and then rewriting a section so that, the art doesn't quite fit anymore, maybe, right? Or I made a slight change to this encounter where there's, one extra person here suddenly who I need to draw. Or I've introduced a new NPC, but I don't have art for them because I didn't know they were going to be in the adventure when I started out, right? The one thing that's going to do to you, though, is extend the time frame for creating your project quite significantly, because you're doing everything in a very serial fashion, right?
Yeah.
Because most publishers don't have that kind of time, they will absolutely have things going in parallel, right? For a bigger project, and this, speaks to sort of like freelancing for Wizards or for another larger company, you might be in a position where you're given something to write and the art is already being created, right? It's already being created, so you can't see it, right? So like if you go back and you say, hey, I've got a question about what this looks like, is the art available? They'll say, no, it's still being worked on, right? They might be able to give you the art order, so you get a sense of, okay, I think I know what it looks like, right? But you're not 100% sure. So you're very often, when you're writing in a space where you don't know exactly what you're writing is going to look like. And then it becomes an editor's job to say, okay, I'm editing this and I've got the art in front of me. And I noticed that these two things are described differently because the art order sets something up in a way that's different than the text. And then the text gets massaged, hopefully in order to line up. Sometimes this stuff gets missed, and you will see books where it's like, where the picture is and the text is not quite in sync.
Right. And I remember even with Wizards during 4th edition, working on Dragon and Dungeon magazines, there were a number of things that were done differently because I think it was so hard for the team to balance the magazine with all their publishing efforts. So on one of the articles that I wrote for them was the first time they said, and please write up the art order. I'm like, oh, geez. So then I had to, look up how you do that and write my first art order and think about things like, I need, and this was for a Dark Sun article. So I had to let them know, like, these people should have darkly tanned skin because you're under the brutal dark sun. And here's kind of what I'm thinking for their hair and their, and just like really start to realize, okay, like that's one way of doing it. And so then I got art that was exactly like what I was thinking, right? It was really cool.
Nice.
Another time that I wrote within also 4th edition, also for Dragon or Dungeon magazine, they said, here's a bunch of art we have, pick one.
Right.
Right. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. They're like, well, actually that one already got taken. Okay, I'll take this one. But it wasn't an exact fit, just like you're saying, but it was, reasonable and I could write to it. And then other times, you provide an article and then they drop in some art from who knows what. Either because it's not a great art order description that was sent out, so it's a little inaccurate, right? You get things like, wielding a dagger when they wield a mace or any of those number of things, or it's just totally different art that's just kind of cool, but doesn't fit. And so in an ideal world, we've got that in sync, right? And we're
ideally, right. Talking about doubling up on roles, it's entirely feasible that your layout person will be your art director. They'll be the one who's in charge of writing up the art orders, right? It's also very possible, and in some cases desirable, for you, the writer designer, the person who's the lead on the project, to take that role on yourself, right? Because you're the one who's in the best position to write a description that matches up to the text that you've already written, at least at the stage that it's at, right?
Yeah.
Talking about writing art orders, the key to writing art orders is to sort of keep them simple, right? To keep them straightforward, to just do like a visual description, thinking about how a person might describe the picture, the illustration, if they were to see it. Okay. Provide enough detail that's important. Any detail that's not important, it's often best just to leave it up to the artist's discretion. I will very often do things like, if it's not important in the adventure, or sorry, Adventures are usually a little bit different because there's often sort of stock NPCs and stuff. But like in a lot of stuff in Forge of Foes, for example, where we said we just want a picture of some certain type of hero doing a certain type of thing, right? I will very often say, here's the scene, your choice of, what ancestry they are, what kind of armor they're wearing, right? You make all that up yourself because it's not important, right? Give the artist the freedom to do what they want to do. Keeping the language simple is important because you don't want to do something. Yeah, very nice. Because you don't want to do things that end up being so complicated in your description that the artist misreads them. Okay. Sure. One thing to keep in mind,
or that they have to do some impossible combination of, they're turning towards the camera, but holding this and then they just create a soup for you, right? Also, in the background should be 5 layers of things happening. Like that's too much, right?
It's way too much. Yeah. Something that, a thing that I often see on projects where someone else has written the art orders, but I'm asked to look over the art orders, is a description that calls for seeing the front of someone and the back of someone at the same time. Right.
We see that on RPG covers because they want to show the heroes, but fighting the thing in the back.
Yeah. That's right. One thing to keep in mind and to be respectful of is that if you're working with an artist whose first language is not English, you have double the incentive to want to be as clear as you possibly can. Okay. I will share an anecdote. This was an artist that I had worked with. It was the first time I'd worked with them. I've worked with them many times since. They're absolutely amazing, and I will work with them forever given the opportunity. But I described the scene, and I had said, here's a number of options that you can choose to show. You could show this, or you could show this, or you could show this, or you could show this. I got the piece back, and every single one of those things was in it. And the artist said, man, this was a real challenge getting all that stuff in, but I'm really happy with how it looks. And I'm like, oh man, I'm so sorry. Right. I did not mean for you to do that. I mean, they're an amazing artist. They're a total pro. They were fine with it.
But the just didn't translate, huh?
But I sort of, in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, I'm going to not do that again. I'm going to make sure going forward that I am more clear, or that I just say, you know what, I'm not going to put 6 things down. I'm just going to put 2. Right.
I had that on the writing side. As a freelancer, I wrote the first epic for 5th edition Adventures League, and I created sort of 3 different things that could be tracked to show how all of the groups playing this thing simultaneously, all the different tables playing, would achieve success.
Right.
And I did include instructions that said we should not use all of them. And all of them were in the final one. And I didn't know that until I was on site to run it. And it was so much work to run this. And I had to apologize to everybody because I did indeed create all these systems, but I had not intended for all of them to be there. And, And so it's true on the writing side too. When you're a contractor or freelancer, that communication is so critical. I had another one where I specifically started in media res as someone stepped, as the characters step into the place of adventure. But I didn't say that had been deliberate. And in fact, I had previously written a prelude sort of piece where you do the more typical, like, get into the keep and then get into the place. And I didn't do any communication around it. And so they actually added an early piece. There just wasn't space for it as written. And so it became like an hour and a half, it became an hour longer than it should have been, and took away from the action. And, it just, that communication piece that I missed was critical. Yeah. So that's true of art orders too.
Yeah. In terms of how to format an art order, there's no one way. There's probably sample art orders online if you've never written an art order before, if you don't have any idea what they're like, to look around. You could also probably reach out to any other indie person. Like if this is your first indie project, reach out to somebody and say, hey, I'd love to see your art order format for this book that you did, which I really, really enjoyed. In very general terms, though, the basic information you need is the size of the piece. Okay. Both in terms of how much of a page it takes up and the number of inches or centimeters that it's going to be.
Yeah.
Right. Like quarter page, half page are all sort of standard, but depending on, how much space you expect that to take up, give them an actual, boundaries as well. Whether you want a background or not. Okay. You can see, like an example, look to the 2024 Monster Manual, look to the 2014 Monster Manual. 2014 figures with no backgrounds. 2024 figures with backgrounds. Okay. So make it clear which one you want. There we go. Yeah.
And all
Make it
kinds of
clear
different
which is
options
which and which one you're looking for, right? Don't ask if you don't ask and an artist does a background and you don't want a background, then that creates trouble for your layout. That makes your layout more difficult potentially.
And then,
Whether it's color or black and white seems obvious, but like if you're doing a shadow dark thing and somebody does a color piece because you forgot to tell them that you just wanted black and white art, that's an issue potentially.
that'd be bad.
The resolution that you want it at. Usually 300 DPI, 300 dots per inch is standard because that's enough that you'll get a great resolution. You'll get a great image when you send that to print if it's being printed. Okay. In my experience, artists often work in a higher resolution than that because they like the higher level of detail for doing fine work. So you may end up in a position where you ask for 300 and you get 600 or 1200. So at some point there, your layout person will decide how to shrink those down, right? Because you want to, in general, you don't want to reduce the size of an image in InDesign. Like if it's 100%, like if it's too big, you don't want to make it 50%. You want it to be 100% at a higher resolution or to actually resample it to make sure it's the correct resolution.
And we have art, like that's in the center of the page, but then we have art that's on the edges, and then we get into something which is bleed, right?
Bleed, yeah. If you're doing a print book, if you're just doing PDF, if this is a project where you're like, I am 100% sure this is never going to be anything other than a digital file, right? You don't have to worry about bleed that much. If you are going to print, whether print on demand or offset, you absolutely have to worry about bleed for any pictures, any illustrations that are going to run to the edge of the page. Because when a book is printed, it's printed on oversized paper, right? The paper is usually anywhere up to like 1/4 of an inch bigger on the side. And then it's trimmed down with a giant machine, which is called a guillotine, right? And it does exactly as the name suggests. It just basically just slices through like 150 sheets of paper at a time, right? So what happens is when you're printing, the printing can shift a little bit, right? You get one page that might be like a couple of millimeters to this side. You get another page that's a couple of millimeters high. If you run an image just up to the edge of the page and the page prints down a little bit, you've got a white border at the top there, which you don't want.
It'll bother
so you do
everybody.
Bleed. Yeah. So when you're asking for bleed, what you're asking for is an extra, usually 1/8 of an inch. Okay. Sometimes 1/4 inch. Most printers have like a minimum size bleed of 1/8 of an inch. So 1/8 of an inch is pretty safe to go with. But if you're working with a specific printer, you should look for their specs and talk to them about their specs.
Yeah. And so then you tell the artist that, and they will know.
Yeah, you tell the artist that.
The kind of coloring, the non-critical part of it beyond
exactly,
that.
Yeah. So the artist will understand that the idea is they're making the picture a little bit bigger than it should be, right? This is always a full frame picture. There's no, usually it's not an issue having like a picture with no background that has bleed because it's not running to the edge except under certain circumstances. But they will understand that they're going to make the image a little bit bigger, 1/4 inch bigger or 1/8 of an inch bigger, whatever it is. And that there should be no important details in that bleed area, right? You don't want to have something in that bleed area which then gets cut off, right? All the important details should be in the center of the image. It should all be sort of boxed in a little bit.
Awesome. All right, so we've got our art. We've got it. As we get these art orders in, we're checking against it. We're dropping them into the layout person is dropping them into InDesign or other layout software to put that all in place. Anything else that I'm missing that is happening at this stage?
I figure what I want to say here. It is entirely conceivable that at this stage, whole sections of the book get rewritten.
What?
And this is absolutely something you should not do. Do not aspire to this. Okay.
But it's never happened on your project, so that's good.
It's definitely never happened on anything that I've had the responsibility for making sure it doesn't happen on. Let's put it that way. It's a thing that can happen. Okay. The chances of it happening increase dramatically if you're not going through the initial stages of the process. If you don't get a full edit on the book, if you're like, oh, I'm pretty good with words, I will edit this myself. Okay. It absolutely will be the case that you're going to get the layout and you're going to be looking at it and you're going to think, oh, that's really not right. This is not what I meant to say. This is really not working mechanically. I had no idea that, I've made some obvious error that I just missed. I overlooked. Okay. And so you think, okay, I have to rewrite it at the layout stage. It can absolutely happen on large projects, especially for big companies that do a lot of different projects ongoing. Talking about sort of like running things in parallel, right? The writing and then the editing and then the art and that sort of thing. Companies that are doing multiple books, and certainly this could be you if you've got, if you like, even if you're an indie and you've got an idea for like, I'm going to put out a line of stuff. I got a whole bunch of supplements that I'm thinking of doing. You might be in a position where you're doing the writing on one project, you're overseeing the editing on another project, you're doing art orders for a third project, and you're talking to the layout person on a fourth project all at the same time. And what can happen is you're like, oh, okay, I am focused on this other stuff because we got a layout emergency. I maybe did not review the text as much as I should have. Okay. That's an honest mistake. It can happen. Here's a dishonest mistake. Being in a position where you say, I don't have time to look at this right now in Word or in Google Docs. I'll fix it when it's in layout. Okay. Yeah. You do not want to do this. Okay. This is a thing where bad stuff will happen as a result of that. It's 100% inevitable. The reason it happens is because it's much more difficult to edit effectively in InDesign than it is to edit in Word or any other sort of, text-based format that you're doing. Yeah. InDesign does have options, like you can open it up in a story frame. I've never used it. I do not like it. I used to work, back when I worked on newspapers and magazines, on another app called Quark Express, which hardly anyone except newspapers and magazines uses anymore. I have no idea how it's still alive, honestly. But it did the same sort of thing, but did it slightly better, but it was still really clunky. Yeah. Okay. So what happens is you end up editing on the page. You end up editing in InDesign, okay? You may end up not even being in a position where you can say to your editor, hey, can you go into InDesign and can you review these sections because we revised them? You may be having to do that yourself. So in addition to doing it in a format and a platform which is not ideal for the purpose, you are now editing your own work, which, as we've talked about, is not something that's a great idea because you will miss stuff. Okay. Worst case scenario, this is only going to happen if you're working with a bunch of different people. Right. Worst case scenario, somebody makes an update on the layout and doesn't ask for anybody else to review it. Right. Yeah. So you're looking like you may be proofing the book at some point. Hopefully it's the PDF proof as opposed to, looking at the first copy to come off the print run. Right. And you look at something and you go, this is not supposed to be here. How did this get here? And it turns out that somebody else on the project thought, oh, I thought that and I thought it was wrong. It seemed like an easy fix. Yeah, so I went ahead and did it.
It's an error-prone place to make changes. And
it absolutely is.
Yeah, you see this in projects, and this happens to all publishers. So I'm not picking on D&D, but just one that when Sean and I on Mastering Dungeons, we reviewed the Planescape product, and there was in the booklet that has sort of setting information, there was a clear copy paste that took place where every single piece had a repeated, incorrectly written piece. Yeah. And there is no way an editor would have missed seeing all of these instances of that problem. Once, sure, anybody could miss that. Even 5 people in a row could have missed it. But when it's in every single place, you know that is a clear indication that someone went outside of the normal way you do it, and you copy pasted this thing, not seeing your error, and it went forward because you did this edit too far in the process without then it being seen again by proper eyes, which is very easy to do when you're in the InDesign step.
Yeah, I know the error of which you speak. I saw it as well. And I have no idea what happened. I didn't work on that book. I don't know any of them. I mean, I know I've worked with some of the folks who worked on the book, but I don't know anything about the process that went into working on that book. But I'd be willing to bet all the money I've got on me right now. But that was an error that happened because somebody said, hey, we need to tweak this. Yeah. And somebody went in at the layout stage, made the change, and it didn't get reviewed by the people who should have been able to review it. Now, I'm not saying that was done with malicious intent.
Oh, no, they're all great.
It was probably
people.
Just like, we don't have time to ask somebody to review this.
And I do that, right? Happens. When I do some change in some document I'm working on, and I will copy paste something and then go, wait a minute, there's a typo in this. And I just copy pasted this typo 5 times, but I'm not part of this critical process and I'm not doing it in layout. And so that's where but anybody, it can happen to anybody, even when you're meaning well, but it's why we put these processes in place and why we do things in certain areas is so that you don't trigger these regrettable mistakes that then you look at the book and go, oh, I can't believe this is in the printed page.
Yeah, it's tough. It's always tough. I'm going to throw out one other sort of side note talking about this, and I'll be quick with this one. I would not recommend writing your game in your page layout program.
Mm-hmm.
I know people who do this.
Yeah.
Okay, they are wonderful people. They are extraordinarily talented designers. This is what they like to do, right? And within certain constraints, there's nothing wrong with it. If they're willing to spend the extra time, because it's much slower writing in InDesign than it is writing in Word and then flowing copy in. Okay, that's great. That's totally up to them. But it's not an ideal system for doing that, right? It lends itself to errors. It lends itself to mistakes. It lends itself to difficulty in editing. Switching sort of the reversing the topic here. If anybody's listening to this who is an editor or is thinking about getting into editing, if you're ever asked to edit something like do like a first pass development edit, not a proofread in InDesign, you absolutely should be charging a higher rate than you would charge to do an edit in Microsoft Word, because it's a slower process. Yeah. It will take you, you'll lose, it'll take you 25 to 30% longer to work in InDesign as it does to work in Word. Right. Okay. So absolutely make sure that if people are asking you to do that, make sure you can do it, assuming that you're proficient with InDesign, but that you absolutely need to be paid for the extra time it's going to take.
Let me ask a dumb question that is separate from this concept of what we're talking about, like, big changes and so on. But I've got a page in InDesign. I'm the layout person, and I know nothing about this. I'm pretending to be this. I'm LARPing being a layout person. And I see that, let's say, like the word, one of those things where the sentence then, or the paragraph ends with this one dangling word, and I don't like the spacing of it. Do I bring in an editor? Do I edit this to make it, like, who fixes that?
That's a tricky question. It really depends on what roles you've got set up. Like if you're the writer on this and you've got an editor who's working on the project and that's their exclusive focus, and you have a layout person, the layout person should either flag it for the editor, or the layout person, as long as you've previously set up that you're okay with this workflow, should make the change and then get the editor to review it. Okay. Layout people should not, as a general rule, unless they are also one of the editors on the book. And I talked about it's quite common for that role to be doubled up, right? They should not be making those sorts of changes. And especially not making them, they shouldn't be making them at all. They absolutely shouldn't be making them without any sort of review, without any chance for somebody else to have a look at it. Okay.
And so,
I was going to say, like, that's the sort of thing that your layout person will often be able to fine tune even before the layout is done, because InDesign and other applications have settings for what's allowable as a widow or an orphan or a runt is what that's usually called.
It'll adjust the text or something.
Yeah. You can adjust the basic settings, right? So it'll air everything out a little bit, depending on, again, the type of layout that you've got. One of the decisions that you and your layout person will make is, are we doing full justified text, or are we doing what's called ragged right? Right, you can look at certain books and both sides of the column are straight. Certain books, the left-hand column is straight and everything else, the words just kind of go where they want. Right? If you're doing full justified, you can adjust those settings a little bit more. If you're doing ragged right, you can't, because there's no point in forcing space in something which is ragged right. It just ends up looking weird in a different way. Right?
Yeah. Okay, so I get to the point where my layout, I think, we think as a team, whoever it is, it looks good. What do we do now to prepare this for where we can actually say, I can print?
Yeah. Once the layout is done, the next stage, the final stage of the editorial process is the proofread. And that's where you're going to, like, everybody sign off on the layout. You're like, this is exactly the way we want the book to look.
And so this is exporting a PDF to share to all my proofreaders.
Exactly. Yeah. This is exporting a PDF. Here's a pro tip, which most people should know, but some people seem to not know, to my eternal frustration. There are two different types of PDFs you can export from InDesign. I don't know about Affinity Publisher or other. I imagine it's the same, because these are two very different formats for PDFs. One is what's called, in InDesign at least, an interactive PDF. One is what's called a print PDF. The interactive PDF is much smaller, and it is much easier to work with when you're proofing it, right? If you're making a copy, if you're creating a copy of the book for proofreaders to look at, make sure you send them the smallest file size you possibly can.
Not a 3 gigabyte PDF.
Yeah, like especially for a large book with a lot of art, right?
Yeah.
You can kick out a print PDF that's 800 megabytes easily, right? And when you give those to people and they're trying to proof them, it's so unwieldy, right? Especially like if you're working on a laptop or what have you, it can take you 3 seconds to move from one page to the next because Acrobat is processing all this information, right? So small file size for proofreading. Once a proofreading is there, you're proofreading the PDF, and that's your preferred format for doing proofreading. When you're asking people to proofread, and this should include like a paid proofreader, okay, because that's the final stage of editing. Actually, sorry, there were 5 types of editors. I forgot proofreaders. I apologize. This is the 5th type of editor you might get working on your book. Okay, this is the proofreader. Proofreaders are focusing almost exclusively, or they should be focusing almost exclusively, on things that have been missed previously, or things that were introduced in the layout that no one caught. And that's things like widows and orphans, and like a line gets repeated somewhere for some reason. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, they're not saying, I think this section should be different, or
well,
I wish you had a blah.
Yeah, they shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Right. If this ever happens, if your proofreader ever says, hey, this whole chapter, has a lot of grammatical issues in it, right? That's a sign that maybe something fell down in the earlier part of your process. Okay. You ideally do not want proofreaders to be finding anything other than small mistakes that were missed elsewhere, formatting issues, layout issues. That's what a proofreader should be concentrating on. Often, one thing that proofreaders will catch, but not always, is mistakes that were introduced because you've been rewriting stuff on the layout. Right? If you revise whole sections on the layout that don't get a proper editing pass, the proofreader may go through and find a whole bunch of stuff that you didn't notice when you were making that revision. And those are things to pay specific attention to, but don't trust the proofreaders to do that because that's not their job. A proofreader should not be doing an actual copy edit, even though all great proofreaders are equally great copy editors. It's a different focus, right? What they're doing at that stage.
Yeah. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and we had for Forge of Foes a number of proofreaders, and they, of course, found things because that's how it happens.
Found an amazing number of things. Absolutely, yeah. No, it just the importance of proofreaders cannot be overstated, right? Especially if you've done a really good, diligent job editing right up to that point. It can be really easy to say, we can just proofread this ourselves, and you absolutely should. Everybody involved with the book, right, who has time, who wants to, should absolutely be involved with the proofreading. You should do a nice close read of the PDF. But having a dedicated proofreader, ideally someone who has not worked on the book before. Right. Because like anything that I'm working on, right, I will, like if I'm an editor, I will often proofread it as well. Like I proofread Forge of Foes, proofread all of the stuff that I do for Mike Shea, Sly Flourish, because I edit and do layout for many of his books, right? But we always get another proofreader in as well, because I've seen this book by that point too many times. I've read it too many times. True. I need someone who can see it with fresh eyes.
It's one of those things where you can think as a creator, I love this. I want to spend as much time with it. It's my baby. I will read it endlessly. And even though that is true and you love the book, when you look at it for the 13 millionth time, not only will it be hard to have that passion for reading it, but also you just already know what the words are supposed to say. And you just can't objectively look at that text properly to find enough things. And so it's that person who's reading it for the first time that will notice, those pieces. Like there's a book that I really love. And I remember, page 1 in the sort of like acknowledgement or, little blurb, there was a typo there. And I'm like, oh, like that, that's the kind of thing that you don't catch when you wrote that, but somebody else would have caught that, right? And it just needed that little bit.
That's actually a really good point. Talking about not wanting to write in InDesign and talking about not wanting to do a lot of revision. There will be things that you didn't write before the book goes to layout, like your table of contents, for example, right? The introduction, the title page, right? So those are the things that you have to write in InDesign because it doesn't make sense to write them beforehand. Right. Those are things that you absolutely want to make sure you've got an independent clear-eyed proofreader looking at. One book that, I can't remember if this was Forge of Foes or if it was a different book. I typed in the name of one of the artists incorrectly in the credits page. and the proofreader caught it. And I'm so grateful for that. This is an artist I've worked with dozens of times previously, right? It's just like, oh man.
All our brains are fallible. It's just
yeah, exactly.
All right, so we've proofread our book. Now we would send it off to a printer.
Depends on what you want to do.
If we're going to print, let's say,
absolutely nothing wrong with doing a PDF, right? Just saying especially for short stuff, for short supplements, short adventures, printing often doesn't make any kind of economic sense.
Yeah, and there's a good Kobold Press article on this, and you have to have. I think Wolfgang's advice was something like you have to have be sure that you're going to sell 1,000 copies. I think is what he said.
Yeah,
that sounds right to merit offset.
Yeah. That's certainly a reasonable number. Not even talking about the number of copies you expect to sell them, but just the page count. Okay, it doesn't cost if it costs X dollars to print a 100-page book, it does not cost X divided by 5 to print a 20-page book.
Right.
Printing the 20-page book is a lot more money because a lot of what you're paying for printing isn't the cost of the paper and the ink; it's the setup of the press.
Yeah, and then they make
which is extremely time-intensive, labor-intensive. Yeah, even if it's whether it's offset or print on demand. Print on demand isn't like a magical thing, where it's just like a laser printer does everything. Right? There's labor involved there. Right.
Yes, it's probably worth saying just that if you don't know anything about this process, it's worth you're taking the time to do some research here of when you print, when you just do PDF, when you do print on demand, and when you do offset printing. And you really don't want to end up in a situation where you have, tons of books in your basement. I've met great creators who have books in their basement, and it is the albatross around your neck that weighs you down forever. So avoid that and do that research, which we're not going to fully cover here other than what we've already said. But, if you were just doing a PDF, you would export the PDF that would now be a higher quality, I'm guessing, and then you could upload that to your various places where you're selling it.
Basically, export the interactive version of the PDF, not the print version. Where you're going to publish your PDF is a great first place to go to for reference and for resources. DriveThruRPG, just as an example, has some really good tutorials, right? Which will walk you through the steps of, hey, this is your first book, you're working in InDesign, this is what you need to do. Yeah. Okay. I don't know if the stuff has been updated a lot recently, but certainly the first time I published anything on there as a PDF many, many years ago now, that's where I went and it was like, okay, this is great. Like I knew how to use InDesign. I knew how to set up PDFs, but they've got some certain things where there's like, this is the best format. This is what you should think about doing. This is how you get it onto the site, right? There's lots of good references. There's lots of good resources out there. Yeah. People who've done it before are also probably good resources. If you know other indie creators who have already put books out, right? DriveThru likewise has a pretty good tutorials about how to set up your book for print on demand. Okay. It will go through a lot of the stuff that we previously talked about, saying if you're running art that's going out to the edge of the page, it must have a bleed. Here's what the bleed settings should be. It will show you the settings in InDesign saying, here's where you set the bleed. Here's where you type those numbers in so it all works good. Okay. Exporting PDFs to just sell as a PDF is pretty straightforward. You hit interactive, you export it, you look at it, flip through it page per page, do a final proof, basically just looking to make sure that there's no pictures missing at that point, or that the text isn't overlapping for some
weird
reason,
transcription problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And you're probably good to go. Exporting a PDF for print, whether you're doing print on demand or offset, is a lot more complicated. Okay. Lots of references out there, lots of tutorials, like I said. If you're looking at a tutorial and you're like, I have no idea what this is talking about, that's a sign you probably want your layout person to be the person who is going to export your book for print, which they were probably expecting to do anyway, because they will know how this works. They'll understand the process a little bit, okay? You have to talk to your printer, whether that's DriveThru, which prints through Lightning Source, okay, which is the big print-on-demand competitor to Amazon KDP in North America, at least, okay? Or whether you're going to an independent printer, someone who's going to do it offset, because every printer has different specifications. And it will be down to them telling you, this is the specific PDF version that you need to export for our software to handle, okay? Some of them may accept newer versions of the PDF standard. Some of them will only accept older versions.
Okay.
Older versions of the PDF standard, when you try to print your book, especially if your book has lots of complicated graphics, lots of things that are knocked out with no background, or I'm going to throw some screen behind it, that sort of thing. It all looks great. You'll export the version for the PDF. You've exported the proof versions. They all look great. You try to export the print version, and it says, we don't like your transparency setup. And we're not going to tell you how to fix it, because that's InDesign's jam. Right? Working with an experienced layout person who knows how to work their way through this is very helpful in this regard. If doing layout yourself is something that you're doing, right, this is something you're going to have to work through. So, Google is your friend, et cetera, et cetera. You'll find other people who've had the same problem. You can probably reach out to the printer. But here's one thing about printers. Lightning Source, which is to say drive-through, is a little bit different because they're doing print on demand. They accept and understand that they're working with absolute neophytes. They're working with people who've never done this before, and they're happy with that, right? Lightning Source's tech support is not spectacular, but you can ask them these questions at least and hopefully try to get a response back, okay? If you're going with an offset printer, the one thing that an offset printer will expect from you, aside from being paid up front in full in advance, 100% of the time, okay, is that you know what you're doing. You understand the print process. If you go to them and say, hey, I'm getting this error, they will probably not be in a position to help you, especially if it's a smaller printer that you've gone to because you're getting a pretty good deal, okay? Offset printing in general, in addition to the technical issues that can crop up, the big thing that's important is, as you mentioned, talking about Wolfgang's excellent article and the things he's talked about in terms of his own experiences as an independent publisher of RPG stuff. The number of copies you generally need to sell to print of an offset book in order to make it cost effective is higher than most people need. And I will say this with 100% conviction, especially if this is your first project, even if it's a book that's big enough, like it's 200 pages or something or higher, and you think, you know what, I could do offset, I would recommend not doing offset under any circumstances, because the potential pain, the potential hassle, and especially the potential for, as you said, having a bunch of books that you end up not being able to sell is really huge. Okay. Offset books are cheaper to print than print-on-demand books. It depends on the type of book. It depends on the amount of content and color. Historically, from anywhere from the 3.5 D&D era up until quite recently, RPG books were almost always in color, right? So you were always kind of looking at that as an option. Shadow Dark, interestingly, has kind of changed that equation a little bit, right? By going with a very retro black and white look. It's cheaper to print black and white than it is to print color. So print on demand, especially print on demand color is very, very expensive. Print on demand black and white is quite reasonable. So if you're doing a black and white book, you might be in a slightly better position. But for print on demand color, you're probably looking at paying 2 to 3 times as much per copy as you would if you're going offset with a reasonably high print run, which is like 1,000 copies, 2,000, 5,000, that sort of thing. The more books you print offset, the cheaper the rate is. The price goes down. The more books you print on demand, if you do a ton of them, it goes down a bit, but not as much. Because print on demand is basically a fixed, like you're paying for the cost of printing, right? And the cost of printing for print on demand is higher than it is for offset.
And there are a lot of benefits, like if you are printing on demand, and let's say you thought, oh, I might get 500 sales, and you get 501, doesn't matter. Print on demand doesn't care whether you're on demanding the 500th or the 501st. But if you ordered 500 physical copies, you probably paid a real premium to have such a small print run. And when you sell your 500th, you can't just order one. You have to order another 500 at this high cost because you're only ordering 500. And so this is all very bad, and more reason to what you said, which is if you don't really feel solid about this and it's your first time, for sure don't do offset printing, because it's just going to lead to headaches. And we haven't even talked about things that we're not really going to fully cover, but warehousing, shipping and distribution. These are all giant nightmares that print on demand avoids, because those are just such huge complications for a newer creator.
Yeah, one of the cool things about RPGs, one of the cool things that leads us to having this conversation is that there is an absolute thriving hobby creator space in RPGs, right? Anybody who wants to do so, who's willing to put in the time and the effort, right, and to learn the skills necessary, can publish their own RPG materials. It's an amazing time to be involved in RPGs, right?
Yeah.
There is no hobbyist community in warehousing, shipping, and distribution. Okay. Once you're into that, once you decide to, if that's what you want to commit to, okay, you are doing a professional's job, and you're doing it presumably on the side of whatever your day job is, which you're already doing on the side of your side hustle, which is writing the RPG book you want to publish in the first place. Well, it's not for the faint of heart, right? Yeah. It's very complicated. It's extremely volatile, especially right now with the tariff situation. Okay, like if you're getting your books printed in the US and somebody orders one of your books in Canada, right? I have no idea what it's going to cost you to send that book up there. It may cost you so much that you have to tell people, I'm sorry, I can't ship books to Canada, right? I can't ship books elsewhere. If you're a big enough publisher, if you're doing a big enough project that you're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to print half my run in the United States or in North America. I'm going to print half of it in Europe. Okay. You can do that. Lots of people do, but that's twice the headache, twice the hassle, and you'll be paying a higher rate because instead of printing, 10,000 books in total to get a lower rate, you'll be printing 5,000 here and 5,000 there.
Yeah. Right? And I would say to creators as well that you are probably good at a certain part of things, right? Like creating, writing. It may extend into things like, an art order, things like that. But the chances that you are also going to be great at negotiating with print companies, managing distribution and shipping schedules, working through tariff language. And I've seen enough nightmares from other folks that I know working through all of these problems. It is an entirely different business that you're suddenly a part of when you are involved in this world of offset printing and in shipping and in distribution. And get some victories under your belt before you decide to advance into that, because it is so vastly different from everything that you've been focusing on as a creator that it probably will be non-fun. In fact, a lot of people will say, like, I really love writing, and suddenly I'm this business person that is managing all of these different customer orders and resolving issues and setting up crowdfunders and fulfillment and all this. And it can take away from what brought you into this hobby in the first place, when your vision might have been, I'm going to make this product and then I'm going to make the next thing. But now you've got to oversee all these other steps. So those are more reasons to maybe not jump right into those deep waters.
There are all sorts. There's so many reasons to not do offset printing, right? Here's another reason to prefer print on demand to offset. If the previous discussion of how offset printing is going to ruin your life isn't enough to daunt you. If you're doing print on demand, you can fix mistakes in your books quite easily. If you do offset printing, you print 500 books or 1,000 books, you've got 500 or 1,000 books that have mistakes in them. If those mistakes are minor, like I said, Forge of Foes, there's one page that has an extra paragraph return in it. You can live with that. It's not a huge deal. Okay. If you've got a book out that has actual, like a bad error in it. Okay. If you got a book that goes out and you're like, oh, we edited this one section, but the old text stayed in the document for some reason and no one noticed. Right. So we got a whole section that should have been revised, but wasn't. We've got a whole section here that isn't doing what we wanted it to do. Right. Nobody caught it. We got a whole section here I really wish I'd had a chance to rewrite that. You've got 500 or 1,000 copies of those you need to sell through. Yeah. If you do print on demand, what happens is you send a copy of your book to the server, and it basically just sits there forever, right? It stays on their system, and every time somebody orders a copy of your book, it gets printed out, right? They print out a brand new one. If at some point you notice, oh, there's a typo here that feels like I want to fix this. It's not like a minor thing, like a misplaced comma, or, I said, there, THERE instead of THEIR, right? I can live with that. Right. You can just upload a new copy of your book. You can make the change in InDesign. You can export a new master file for your print output. You send that to their server and you're good to go again, right? So you'll have printed a small number of books with a mistake in them, and you can then continue to print the rest of your books that look the way you want them to, right? Yep. Print on demand is really like prior to print on demand was a thing everybody wanted, right? Absolutely. People are like, oh, offset is too much money. It's too expensive. I can't commit to this. I got all these great ideas for books, but it's just way too complicated. It's too much money. Print on demand made that possible, right? And as such, it's such a cool idea. It's such a great thing to do. Let's talk about the kind of elephant in the room. Print on demand print quality is not quite as good as offset print quality is. Okay. For my money, it doesn't make any difference, right? The quality of print on demand, it's not that offset is good and print on demand is poor. Okay. Print on demand is really good. Offset is really, really good, right? It's a marginal difference for most books, for most products, right?
Yeah, and how the print on demand is made can vary things like, what the color looks like. But that's true. Like I've seen Wizards of the Coast books where one was printed in China, one was printed in the US, and you could argue which was better, but the color saturation was slightly different, right?
Yeah.
Two printers slightly different. So it all kind of happens anyway. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
If you were offset printing, what is the ideal sort of place in the timeline to say, okay, I need to start selecting a printer, and thinking of getting quotes and things like that? Does that happen around the time when you're in layout, because then you're sure of your page size?
Yeah. Whenever you're absolutely positive about what your page count is, and once you've got enough of the layout done that kind of, it's pretty standard. If you're printing in North America, you're probably going to be on 8.5 by 11 paper. There's not a lot of play there, except again, like Shadow Dark, you might want to do a digest size thing. So that's if you're writing your book and you're not sure whether it's going to be a 5e supplement or a Shadow Dark supplement, wait till you make that decision. I guess would be the the important thing. Once you know what the page count is, you're in a position where you can reach out to a printer, because you can say, hey, I'm looking for a quote on this type of book. Okay. Full color throughout, this many pages, 8.5 by 11, full bleed trimmed. That's all kind of standard, right? They will ask you a question, or you should be able to tell them ahead of time, soft cover or hard cover. Okay. Two different types of printing, two different types of binding. Soft cover, generally cheaper. Hard cover, much more common for RPG stuff in the current age anyway. Hardcover also feels more official, I guess. It feels fancier, right? Most people, like if you're going to the trouble of doing a book, you're probably going to do it in hardcover, because you're going to want to sort of have that thing you can hold up and say, look what I have wrought. And once you're there, you can talk to them about it. Now, again, reasons to be wary of doing offset printing if this is your first time. That's not the only thing you need to talk to your printer about. Your printer also needs to know, where are we shipping these books to? Right? What's the shipping address? So are they shipping them to you, so you're going to put them in your garage or your basement? Are they shipping them to a distributor because you've already working on signing up a deal? If you don't have a distributor yet, you're going to have to say, well, I'm not sure yet, because we're still choosing a distributor. Nothing wrong with that, but the printer isn't going to be able to give you a final estimate, because it's going to be open to like where this is going to get shipped to, right? How much it's going to cost to get there. Printers are usually really good for giving you a firm fixed quote on the print job, because they know what their overhead is. They know how much it costs to do things. On shipping, they will give you an estimate probably. And that's as good as they can do, because they have no control over whether the shipping cost goes up. And it's not even a matter of like tariff weirdness, right? It could be something as basic as like there's a surge in fuel prices. Right. That happens constantly. So if you book your printer 6 months out and they say it's going to cost, $500 to ship this pallet of books to a destination of your choice, maybe it's $650 by the time. Okay, it gets there. And that's talking about like a domestic printer. If you're looking at printing overseas, and there's certainly many, many companies that do that. There are some great printers overseas where you can get stuff done. But the shipping from overseas gets even weirder. And even again, notwithstanding like the current tariff nightmare scenario that all RPG publishers are living through, right? It could simply be the matter that the ship that you think your stuff is coming over on gets basically bought up by someone with more money and more expensive products that they need to ship. And suddenly your shipping cost is doubled what it was supposed to be. Right. That's a story that's happened to a lot of RPG publishers, a lot of Kickstarters, go from being, something that, that could have and should have made a little bit of money on the project, on, you know, one of these labor of love kind of scenarios, and ends up losing money because the shipping was so much more than had been anticipated.
It's why it's really good to read those accounts by people who have done crowdfunding projects where they can share what they actually made on a project and that shockingly small amount. You can learn a lot from that. Let's talk just very quickly as we wind up here. Crowdfunding. When is the ideal time to launch your crowdfunding project? You know, do you do that when you're in layout because you feel solid about the size of it? Can you do it when you're in editing? You know, any recommendation there?
Like most of my answers, I think today I'm going to waffle and say it really depends, right? There's two broad schools of thought, and I will say this. One is it's great to have the project mostly done by the time you crowdfund, because then you got a as short as possible period of time between when people have given you money and when you're able to promise them a book.
Yeah.
Okay. The other school of thought is the crowdfunding is meant to raise money for me to pay for my editor and to pay for the art, right? And I don't have enough to go out of pocket on this, right?
Yeah.
So put it off for as long as possible, right? Here's my idea. Here's what I think I'm capable of doing, right? The more you've got written, the better off, because it's nice to be able to say in your Kickstarter page or what have you, this book is completely written. We're just looking to go into editing. People understand what that means, right? They understand that the primary creative commitment is complete, right?
Words exist.
Yeah,
These
exactly.
topics will be addressed. Yeah.
It also means you can put samples out. You can show them what the book looks like. Talking about when you bring your layout person on board, right? A layout person on board well before the book is ready to lay out, because you want them to do the overall design of what the book is going to look like and to flow some sample chapters for you, so that you've got something you can send to people. You say, hey, click here to download this and see what the book's going to look like, right? You're going to want to commission a couple of pieces of art beforehand, right? Before the crowdfunding, so that you've got something you can show to people saying, here's some of the amazing art that we're going to have in this book. Right?
Yeah, I mean, Forge of Foes, right? We had people who were writing to us about how they were already using the sample in their games, and it was making their games better, and they couldn't wait for the book.
Yeah,
while the crowdfunding was running, and so that was great advertising to see that much excitement. And you're right, and I think also, especially in today's world, when you create all this marketing push, which often a creator is when you're smaller, on the smaller side, your whole life isn't marketing. But you force yourself to do a marketing push for crowdfunding, so that when the thing releases shortly after that, then it carries with some of that marketing push that you've done, and you know, it's not old and dated and needs to be relaunched. It kind of flows all through a little more easily to do the bolstering of the post crowdfunding. This is out in the wild, and the public can use all of the same assets and messages and so on that you put together because you had to. If you're doing that sort of crowdfunding for the idea, to support the idea, that's great. That's what a lot of crowdfunding was built for. But it means that you will have to then have a different type of marketing when it's done, right?
Yeah.
And that may be 2 years later or something, depending on.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. Like the more lead time you allow yourself, the more time you give backers to complain about why the book isn't out yet. That's another thing that lots of Kickstarter creators, lots of crowdfunding games have to deal with. You know, so that's a thing to think about.
I want to highlight or just mention for folks who are interested, there is a group called Rising Tide, which creators can join. There's a Discord, and they put out all kinds of videos as well. They have a couple of videos that I found were very useful by Kim Hughes on publishing RPGs, including the manufacturing and printing side of things, considerations around that, shipping and all of that. So it's worth checking out for all those details that go beyond what we talked about. And there are all kinds of complications, right? Like if you do a book, that's one thing, but if you do, say, a starter set that involves pieces, that can be considered to be a toy, and suddenly you're in completely different realms. So there's so many things that are complicated that we can't possibly address on a show like this. So that's a way to get some awareness of it if you check out that series of videos. Anything else, Scott, that we've missed in this that we should discuss?
I mean, it's an endless topic. You can talk about this forever, literally, because it's a publishing is complicated, right? It's a lot of it's a bunch of different skills that all have to kind of come together to create one thing, right? It's very different than writing a novel, right? It's very different than doing music, for example, right? That said, it's also exceptionally rewarding, right? And it is, like I said before, there's this amazing creative hobby space in RPGs that doesn't really exist anywhere else, right? And for that reason alone, I think it's worth, if you've got an idea that you think is worth pursuing, if you've got this dream of writing something, I think you should absolutely follow up on that, right? There's any number of right ways to do things. There's only one really wrong way to do things. Right. And that is to write something that you have no idea whether anybody else wants to read it and to do your own editing. Right. That's sort of, as long as you're not doing that, I think you're in pretty good shape. Right. If you, there's many other starting points, there's many other places to begin, and there's lots of different ways you can go through this process. Right. One thing I will probably add, and this is something that I think most people are aware of, but just to make clear, we've talked a lot about, when you're doing this, we're writing from the perspective that you are the designer, you're the writer, and you're going to hire an editor, you're going to hire artists, you're going to hire a proofreader, you're going to hire a layout person. If you're not at the position where you're ready to do that yet, like you're not in the enviable state of saying, I've got a great day job, it pays me really well, I have enough, that I can do this as, sort of like a little bit of a dream, sidecar to my hobby, right? It's entirely possible to look for other people who are in the same position as you, right? Who are like, I've got this thing that I do, but I don't have enough money, okay, to actually set myself up as a publisher. Because it's entirely possible to do each of the things that you're all good at together, right? Like if you're somebody who's got a great idea for a supplement or for an adventure or something, but that you're probably not going to be able to afford to hire artists and pay them a good rate that you're comfortable paying. Right? You can reach out and try to find an artist and say to them, hey, I've got this interesting thing. Would you like to become my partner on it? Would you like to collaborate? Okay. Lots of artists will say, I don't have the time to do that, but, thanks for thinking of me. But there are lots of folks out there who are in exactly the same position as you. They're in exactly the same place you are at this particular point. And they might be perfectly willing to say, yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. Okay. It's fun to work on stuff like that, especially with people who you maybe don't know, because you get to know different perspectives creatively, different people doing different things in different ways, right? If you're the designer, you may reach out and find an editor who's interested in working with you, right? You may end up putting yourself together like a little kind of a collective, right? And doing that on a project by project basis is a perfectly reasonable first approach to doing what you want to do, right? The one advantage of that, going way back to the beginning, talking about like if you want to be a freelancer, first thing they'll ask you is send us a sample, right? If you're working with a bunch of other folks, at the end of the day, you may sell some copies of this, you may not, right? You may not sell enough copies to actually cover the time that you spent on it as a side project, as a side hustle. But you've got something that you can show to other people. You can say, yeah, here's the 3 supplements that I've published with my partners. Yeah. Right. That's what I'm doing. This is my entry point into the creative space. Right.
And I'll say that,
and eventually you may get to the point where you can actually, like take it to the next level.
Yeah. And, and I'll say that the small things you create are wonderful, because when you eventually crowdfund something or release something, people who like what you do will want to get other things from you. And having a bunch of small things that they can add to their shopping cart or to their crowdfunder or whatever can vastly help on your end as well, because you can offer more to them, which is what they're looking for. Scott, this has been amazing. Thank you so much. We've gone way over the time that I envisioned. So thanks through staying through all of it, because I think this is just so valuable for people. It's certainly valuable for me. Where can people find you, and what kind of work do you provide in this hobby?
People can find me probably most easily on Blue Sky or Mastodon Dice Camp, where I am Scott F. Gray with an A. In both places. I have a very sporadically updated website at insaneangel.com, which also has contact info there if you want to reach out. The work that I generally do is developmental editing. I worked freelance for Wizards of the Coast for just almost exactly 20 years. My first assignment for them was in 2004. The last book I worked on them, the last two things I worked on them was Fizban's Treasury of Dragons and the wonderful Peril in Pinebrook starter adventure that Sean Merwin wrote. I have also worked for MCDM. I was the lead editor on the Draw Steel RPG just released. Did a tiny bit of work on the wonderful Daggerheart RPG, did a little bit of editing, the very last stage of that. Do a little bit of my own stuff. I'm in the enviable position that I'm busy enough working for other people that I don't get as much time to work on my own stuff as I would like. But one thing I'm also very open to is just, I like talking about this process. I like talking about the industry. So anybody who's got questions, if you want to reach out, I am happy to yak at you. I don't mind that at all.
Well, thanks, Scott. I think you've provided invaluable advice to folks today.
I hope so.
So I really,
thank you,
really
man.
appreciate it. For anybody who's ever wondered how an RPG book is made, the answer is that it depends and it's complicated, but this provides...
Very messily is the short answer.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Scott. See you soon.
Thank you, man.